How you doing, everybody? Is the sound okay? Hi, John. Yeah, the full automation. Yeah, that's a lot of things I think have gone over to CAD CAM and some of the other things like that. Um, this is this is one of the things I think that in sort of like the early part of the 21st century, in the like between 2000 and 2010. Uh, I think a lot of stuff was happening then that was, I would really like to see it happen again. Hey, neighbor, how you doing? Yeah, we got a little overcast today. Sort of a nice, comfy morning, I guess. Cozy morning here in Connecticut. Um, yeah, I was looking at that of the over the past 20 years, but it was like somewhere between around 2000 and 2010 when you had the during that first decade a number of things were happening. Companies like FP Journe actually started in 1999. I mean, as an independent, but a lot of guys who were in the late 90s who were just getting out of we'll stop getting out of watchmaking school were cranking things up. um, I think at that time, Philippe Dufour also came up with the idea that he was going to make these special watches and just have a few of them, which are now worth $1 million. Wish I knew then what I know now. What else was going on? Oh yeah, um, Roger Dubuis and Daniel Roth had their own companies, eponymous. I think that's the right term for it. And so a lot of things were. I mean, there was a huge amount of stuff getting started. Hey, Rancher, how you doing? Big Sal Junior, good to see you. A Doc at his watch. Hi, Doc. What's up? Hi, Adam. Okay, watch enthusiasts here has never been so high in number, including Asian market. Yeah, I would. That's a good point, John. I think to some extent, at least with me, is that the internet had a big influence on me. My one of the first one of the first watch channels I looked at was Archie. And Archie was back then, Archie had some really not back in early 20th century, but when he was first getting started, he had been working, I guess, in a watch store and had some really interesting kinds of things that were not what he is sort of doing today. Back then, it was really a good information thing. So that was one of the first ones, and some of the other ones. Um, I'm trying to think some of the early ones. One of the early ones I didn't I didn't pay much attention to him, but he was doing stuff early on. Was the Urban Gentry? He had his channel. Um, Another guy was Federico. Federico had a back then. He used to have all of these meetings. He and Urban Gentry and Federico would be having these little chats and so forth. Trying to think some of the other stuff that I sort of got some ideas about. Um, so I mean, so that was in terms of the influence of the internet. I think though this is during the period of the last 20 years. Some of them have been more recent. Other ones have been further back in that. Hi, Zeus. I was about to say the internet. Hi, Dom. Hater, good to see you. eBay was a big influence. Oh, good point, Adam. You're Yes, that was a huge influence. Yeah, that's um I got into the internet around 1992. Um I had just taken a job at the time as an associate dean at the University of Texas in El Paso, Texas. And there was something that was called Gopher at the time. That was how we got around the internet. And my son was going to Cambridge University, and I wanted to go and visit him. And using Gopher, I was able to get the train schedule between London and Cambridge. That was very exciting. That was Gopher, and then came Internet Explorer, and then all of this other stuff. And I started getting more and more into it myself, just mainly as in terms of programming. Um, hey, Dominic. Hey there. Yeah, okay, yeah, so I think that probably changed a lot, I'm glad you brought that up, Adam. I hadn't of course, it changed everything. One of the things I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't think Amazon, uh, has had much to do with in terms of, oh, I don't know, sort of watches in terms of buying or anything else. They've had a big influence, a huge influence on the bookmaking, and I mean, companies like Tower Books and Barnes and Noble, uh, the ones that are left have a very little influence. Uh, Whereas the things like Chrono 24, eBay, these have a gigantic influence because you can go out and go poking around. Some of the things too, I think that's been interesting about Chrono 24, they've had some pretty good articles. They had, I mean, some about other than trying to push their watches, they have those too. We don't want to forget that. But they have some interesting things. The watch I have on now uh, was when Marco Lang, this is a Lang and Hein, and they were just getting started right around 2000, early 2000s, and now here's another change. They were a few years ago. Marco Lang got bought out, started his own eponymous company, and so forth. Used watch value, attention, appreciation. Yeah, that's a good point. It's become like Bitcoin. You know what happened to Bitcoin recently? Some guy had been evaluated worth billions has gone broke. That's true with that's so there are a lot of things like that that have gone under. Um, some other things with watch companies, like this is one it that is sort of a funny kind of influence, and this is, Harry Winston. Now, Harry Winston was known by one and all as sort of the jeweler of the stars, and at the Academy Awards, the announcer would say, "Oh, so and so's got $1 billion worth of Harry Winston jewelry on." When they started watchmaking, though, but the people that were involved in some of the early well, there's actually Harry Winston goes way back. I think in the 20s they had a few watches, but in the more recent times they had Roger Dubuis, um, Jean-Marc Viderec working on their watches, and so a lot of the stuff they came out with, and then they had their opus or annual opus where they had all of these watchmakers. The first one was F.P. Journe, and basically he had a resonance watch with a Harry Winston sort of build around it, and that thing must be worth a fortune these days. I don't know how they didn't make a whole lot of them, but what that started was something, and then when Harry Winston was bought by Swatch, I don't think they've done much since then. What else has been going on in the last 20 years? I like Fed TV, yeah, TVJ, Christian on the couch talking about watch topics. Yeah, Etsy is also a newcomer. John, one of the most interesting watches, and one of the best deals I got was from Etsy. Etsy's great. Every now and then you find something on Etsy. I found a gold, what was it? Dunhill with a Jacquet 736 movement in it. Got it. Came in this weird box with all, it was just it was it was a mess. Took off the bands, got some gator uh, green gator band for it, really nice ones. I think I found that on Etsy too. Then my wife took it away and wears it. Looks great on her, much better than on me. But it was Etsy is one of those places. There are a couple newer places like that. One's called First Dibs. Another one is called The Real Real. I've been seeing some really interesting watches on that, and of course, along came other ones like Shopworn. Shopworn, every now and then I go take a look and see what's on Shopworn. Sometimes they have great deals, other times they have nothing. It's one of those things. Joma Shop is another one like that that had some, and again, this is the emphasis has become, I think, the growth of the secondary market. Some of them still calling it the gray market. It hadn't been the gray market for years, in the sense that there's something, not quite about it. It is a secondary market, and people relying on it include the major watchmakers. What else you guys have? Um, the rise of independence. Yes, Rancher, the rise of independence. This is very interesting. Um, this is going to tie me. When I first started writing books for publishers, this was back sort of in the 70s, early part of the 70s, as a matter of fact. And there was my publisher at the time was a New York publisher, and I went to see him, and we were talking about books and stuff. And he said, "God, this is in the 70s." He said, he said someday, and he was talking about booksellers. He said someday there's just going to be like a handful of these giant ones, and then there could be a million little bitty publishers, independents. And boy, was he right. I've never he didn't even realize that this is way pre-internet. And what happened was that the companies, these publishing companies, they would gobble up all kinds of different ones. And I published a book with one company, and before I knew it, it was belonged to someone else. I published a book with Addison Wesley, and I think before the ink dried, it belonged to Random House. So a similar thing. But then what happened was that the whole thing got gobbled up by Amazon, and um, not quite that much happened. But what is it? Richemont, Swatch, and a few other companies have been buying up little ones. And at the same time, you see all of these little independents coming along, and that's sort of been interesting to see. Um, yeah, Dominic, Rolex is going to have a certified pre-owned. Uh, that's going to be, in other words, you can overpay for the used one. My God, I tell you, sort of that or sort of implies that there's such a demand that they can't keep up with the manufacturing. They got to somehow get their mitts on some pre-owned one. There are a lot of companies that love Rolexes. I mean, it's sort of even some of the top watch sellers like Cellini's in New York. I was talking to the guy who's the head of Cellini's, and he was going on not about the quality of the watches that Rolex had, but about how much money they made and how good at it they were. I thought, okay. Hey, Brian, how you doing? The rise of oh yeah, the rise of Bill's favorite material. Silicon. That's funny. I worked. I was always for most of my career, or at least the second part of my career. I was up to my ears in silicon. That was one of the things. One of the reasons I liked uh, mechanical watches. They were silicon free. Um, there's I've talked to some independents, and man, I tell you, they're not going to jump on the silicon bandwagon no matter what. I mean, they were like, um, one told me, he said, "Oh, it's a dirty word among some," and there's some really excellent um, spring makers. That's the whole thing. Straussman that's made by H. Moser. When you talk to Edward Malin, the head of H. Moser, he said, "Oh, well, we make I don't know what 2 or 3 thousand watches a year. We make about 50,000 of this Strassman hairsprings, and that's a big part of their income flow. I think that they're making something happen in a good way at H. Moser. I think that they were able to keep their quality, but they introduced watches that have been selling out almost immediately at a at at a more, we'll say, a more affordable price. And that's sort of an interesting thing. In fact, there's sort of been, at least since I've been involved getting uh, H. Moser. I think there was a time during the '90s. I don't know who owned H. Moser then, that they were sort of these not so good watches, and then somebody bought them, and then they came up with these great watches with these stupid names, like they what were they called? I don't know. I forgot the names of the watches, but they're really great watches. Nobody wanted them, uh, uh, and so people like me were able to get them at huge discounts, and I did. And they're great watches, but they're like the Henry double hairspring. Nobody wanted that, and plus it was very expensive for Moser to produce, and so they dropped it. And but they had other ones like I forgot the Mayu and Bantu or some stupid names like that. And then they had Endeavor and all of these other name changes. And then the third part was that I think there's a movement that's called the HMC 200. It's an automatic movement. The ones that I have are both hand wound. I mean, very traditional kind of things. They're great. They're fantastic. Both of them. But the new ones they have kept the same quality, but they're able to bring it in both in styles and and at a price where more people can afford them. So that's a company that's really gone through a lot of different kinds of things. And the other thing about them, it's all for the better, as opposed to some like good God, poor old Harry Winston. That they used to have the most interesting watches and the most interesting watchmakers. Loop This is a very interesting, essentially a market maker with a trusted variant valuation process. Ah, okay. I run across Loop This, but I don't remember exactly what it is. Um, yeah, there's another thing too. I I think as far as our hobby's concerned, I think there's been a growth in our hobby too. I mean, a big growth in the last 20 years. And I think that goes back to what Adam had initially alluded to, is that the internet is, so much on the internet. Um, when I first started really seriously collecting, I'd always loved watches, but I really got super serious about it. I bought a Patek Philippe, sent a guy almost like out of his back, his back bedroom was where he was dealing them from, and I sent him a wired the money. I didn't know what I was doing. Then I bit my nails for a while until my watch finally arrived, and it turned out to be a nice watch. I was afraid to wear it though because it's a little delicate, but it was a great watch. But that was a little small and a few other things like that. And so as I learned more and more about it, two things happened. One, I learned what I liked, and also two better places where I could sort of make some pretty good deals. That was I don't know today. I'm still, still trying to find the same kind of formula, trying to find really good watches that are undervalued. That's to me is the essence of what I consider a watch collection, and find them in unusual places. One of the ones I'm trying to think recently, sort of that's dried up to an extent because a lot of information has come out, so a lot more people are sophisticated. Rancher and I were getting these great deals on Daniel Roth watches, and boom, boy, that thing that went up in smoke as more people discovered them. I think that was one thing the pandemic did is that you could there were so many watches that people normally would buy that just weren't available, and so they started poking around and finding where some other good ones were, and unfortunately they discovered some of the hidey holes that I'd been getting great deals on watches, and both the price went up and the quantity went back down. So maybe over the next few years we can see some more of that. For who knows? Let's see what else is going on. Jill Genta. Let's see. Also, hi, Velvia. Back then, when a watch auction, one had to the outbid the dealers. Now one has to outbid the world. That's true. Some though, this is. I got a great watch. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I actually oh, yeah, I got one of my, Daniel Roth right before Big Discovery, and I think think the one I got I have a couple of them. I think the one I got was the Metropolitan, and boy, I tell you, even paying that 25% net on top of it, it was a good deal. Hi, Apar. How you doing? Good to see you. The rocks you have to look under are getting smaller and smaller, yeah, and they're getting fewer and fewer, and more people know about them. So, hey, William. Hey, Kaz. Good to see you. Tim, I see. Tim is up early drinking. That's good to see. I always worried that Tim isn't taking care of himself. Oh, okay. Let's see. Um, it's 5 p.m. somewhere. That's true. Yeah, on the ah, oh boy, yeah. At least for the U.S. and probably some other countries too as well. Today's a big day at the World Cup, so that's in any Dutch here today. A least time. No, I have. I think the Americans are always. At least I am. I like soccer. I coached my kids' soccer team when they were growing up, and it's every place in the world except the U.S. It's called football. So, but we still call it soccer. I think more and more people are interested in the World Cup. I mean, it was like for us, it was a World Series and a Super Bowl, and then the March Madness with basketball. But now, I tell you, I look forward to the World Cup as much as anyone. Usually, though, it's not too exciting for very long as U.S. gets bounced out. They made it this time, though, or at least as far. Now they got to play the Dutch, and Netherlands has always had these great teams. So We'll see what happens. Um, hey there, Tuna. Um, okay, what else has happened? I'm trying to think what else has happened. The some some watch companies. One thing I think it was uh, Rancher that mentioned it was this the huge number of these small independents, and there seem to be two types of independents, and this has been true with I think most not only watch companies but publishers and a lot of other things, and that is most of them don't make it. They're around for a while and poof, they disappear. And other ones they're around and they're so good or they've captured or got the interest of some market that is they're around. I mean, like you take for example, guys like F.P. Jorn and Kerry Voutilanen and Beat Haldeman and some of these other guys that are just these fantastic watchmakers. But other than collectors and a few people, yeah, well, basically collectors and I don't know what you'd call them, people who just they got to have the best watch that there is. Uh, these guys, their only problem is that they're too busy. They can't fulfill as all of the demands they have. I was looking at one the other day, Bexy, I think BEXI, something like that. What they make these fantastic watches at fantastic prices, but I mean, really beautiful work that they do. Can you make a web crawler to search watch deals on certain watch specifications? Nah, nah, I would. He was. Oh my God! I tell that's dumb. That's what we've got to do as watch collectors. We got to be the crawlers. You know, if, yeah, I think there you can pretty close not a web caller, but crawler, but you can take you can get some of that with Google. You can put in something, 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 and of course, Google comes up with a lot of weird stuff that has nothing to do with what you want or watches altogether. But yeah, you can sort of a web call. I could see that, and then sort of, I think in the stock market they have something like that. They have a you're waiting for a certain buy or sell, and you look around and they finally find one, and then they make it. That's sort of an interesting idea. Hey, Ivan, the emergence of the watch geek combined with big money pushing the trend, in-house movements, and more premium experience. Yeah, yeah, that's sort of. It seems to have stretched two ways, Ivan. The other thing is that I think there's been a lot of work done in the promotion of watches to try to get people to accept things that are lesser. That's all I'll say. I don't want to get into that. Uh, if anything at any price point captures the public, it's gone. Yeah, that's true. Micro brands have gotten huge. Junior, yeah, they have. That's another thing too. Sort of when is a brand a micro brand and when is it something else? I think after it's been around for a few years, it's no longer a micro brand. You get some guys come up with some great ideas. One watch company that may have been and may still be considered a micro brand that I really like is Xerec, I think, XEREC. They do these really interesting watches using so I think they're using Myota movements, but boy, what they've done with multiple tracks and things like that is very, very interesting. And so there's some, and another one called Gorilla. They have come up with very inexpensive watches, but doing some interesting stuff. Not like Fusee and Shane are not a Rematoir Egalite, but other things that are still very interesting with very humble movements, and that's always fun to see because they're more affordable. Hey, it's frying pan time. Okay, guys. Now, listen, here's what I'd like to do this afternoon. I'd like to talk about, given what happened in the past 20 years, and one of the things, let's hope that doesn't happen again, is this stupid pandemic, because that really messed things up. Sort of went along like this, and then boop, hit the pandemic, and now it's sort of struggling to get going. Let's see if we can sort of look ahead and see if we can figure out what's going to happen in the next 20 years. And remember, if we can figure out ahead of time where things are going, we may be able to get watches that we can afford now that later on are going to be highly valued. Anyway, if you can make it, 4 o'clock New York time, we'll see you then. Otherwise, thanks for coming and getting, especially some of you I know got up very early. The rest of you, it's it's tomorrow. So take care. I hope to see you at 4.